Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Governor, it's great being with you. I remember Governor Branstad in his first run. He's a little grayer. Still got that mustache, though. And I think you're providing a lot of leadership for Iowa in terms of good health. He did remind me, as one of his official acts, we all get to do things like this, he pardoned a pig at the Bacon Festival. Once again proving that we don't have pigs in Florida, so it does prove the federalist system is alive and well. Bill, thank you for that great invocation. And in fact, I did say, why are you are you going to stop getting your butts kicked in Colorado? Because we need to work on purple states for our country's sake as well. And I'm delighted the fact that you've now pledged, I guess I'm coming to a fundraiser, but you've pledged, you've pledged to make sure that, that the butt kicking is going to go another way this time. It is a joy to be here with ALEC. This is a place, the fountainhead for a lot of really important ideas, not just in education, but across the policy spectrum. But on education policy, you all have been involved in this before country was cool, and it's an honor to be back with you. In 1993, ALEC took the growing cost of education, divided it by the lack of results, and demonstrated that we cannot buy student achievement from unaccountable government bureaucracies. In fact, since 1950, the number of adults in public education has increased at 4 times the rate of the number of students. The increase in administrators and other non-teaching personnel has increased 7-fold. Big government turned the one-room schoolhouse, that idyllic notion that people still grasp a hold of as though we were living 100 years ago, into a massive jobs program. Kids were FTEs, full-time equivalents, good for a guaranteed payment regardless of outcome. FTEs also are the linchpin for funding outsized pension obligations at the expense of current spending in the classroom. If schools don't do a good job, we're told it's because they aren't getting enough money. If spending increases and they still aren't performing, it's because it isn't enough money. America has become a global leader in education spending while also becoming a global laggard in math and science. By helping shed light on this, ALEC has laid the groundwork for reform efforts all across the country and in Florida. Instead of throwing more money out the helicopter door and hoping for the best, we began to demand the best. We became national leaders in learning gains instead of spending gains. Now, such reforms are being enacted across the country, all across the country, thanks to the great work of many of you in this room. Thanks to conservative legislative leaders and committed governors who opt for bold action instead of timid politicking. The progress demonstrated by states turned education reform from a grassroots conservative cause into a widespread bipartisan movement. Just last year in this city, a Democratic mayor confronted the Chicago's teachers union, hoping to address the fiscal implosion and academic failures of this city's public school system. I thought the unions called me some pretty bad things when I was governor, and they keep doing it today. Then I heard what they were calling Rahm Emanuel. Woo! Talk about Chicago-style politics. That I disagree with Mayor Emanuel on almost every issue other than education reform does not mean that I won't welcome him to the cause on this one. He is by no means alone. Look at Detroit. As the city descended into bankruptcy, its public school system was mired in corruption and mismanagement, prompting Education Secretary Arne Duncan to call it a national disgrace. The city spends more than $19,000 per student a year, and for that investment, it produces some of the worst academic results in the nation. Is it any wonder that charter enrollment is growing to the point where now 1/3 of Detroit kids are in charter schools, and my guess is over the next 5 years that number will probably become a majority? What ALEC was talking about 20 years ago has sadly come to pass. In most places, we have an education system designed around the economic interests of the adults, where academic achievement of the kids is secondary. Cities like Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Chicago are closing dozens of half-empty, failing schools while parents line up for charters. In fact, what we have is a glut of schools that parents don't want and a dire shortage of those that they do want. I don't think the fate of children should be determined by the luck of a draw at a lottery. And that's what exists in many parts of our country. It is a huge tragedy. Those vested in the status quo lash out with personal and political attacks. They hatch conspiracy theories about plots to destroy public education. In fact, one's probably being hatched right now as I speak at the ALEC convention. They do everything but confront the reality that the system they are defending has failed. Not reforming is not an option. Our students have fallen behind their international peers in math, science, and reading. And it isn't just poor kids, because generally people immediately think, no, this is only a problem in the urban core areas of our country. It's all of our kids. It is good that we're focusing on high school graduation and that we're seeing an increase in graduation rates. But high school diplomas must be backed by sufficient academic rigor so that the students receiving them are prepared for the next step. Here's the fact. When only 1/3 of our students leave high school ready for college or a career, we're kidding ourselves. We're lying to those students, and we're positioning this nation for decline over the long haul. The result is that we're not producing enough scientists or welders, doctors or plumbers, nurses or mechanics, engineers, and the list goes on and on and on. Despite high unemployment, there are 3 million skilled jobs going unfilled because companies cannot find qualified applicants. In the new economy, auto mechanics work with advanced electronics and complex drivetrains. Their toolboxes have come with computers. The assembly lines of old are being replaced with high-tech production processes. Polls show Americans stand out in the world in their belief that individual initiative creates success. But at the same time, a wide range of studies show that social and economic mobility is in decline in this country. More than at any time in recent history, children born into poverty are more likely to remain there as adults. Studies done by the Brookings and American Enterprise Institutes show growing inequality in which the advantaged are becoming permanently better off and the disadvantaged permanently worse off, and those in the middle are getting squeezed. The prospect for economic mobility is becoming increasingly remote. I recognize the added challenge of educating lower-income children, but that does not excuse us from making every effort to do so. Nobody has the moral right to look at a child's circumstances and from that prejudge his or her ability to learn. Low expectations are a cancer in the classroom. The future of far too many children hinges on only the first 4 years that they spend in school. Those who can't read after that face dismal prospects for the future. Just follow the statistical trail. Almost 90% of students who failed to earn a high school diploma were struggling readers in 3rd grade. 85% of kids who enter the juvenile justice system are functionally illiterate. 70% of adult prisoners can't read above a 4th grade level. Right now, we have about 17 million kids enrolled in K through 3 in the United States. About half of those kids live in poverty, and about half of them will enter 4th grade functionally illiterate. Just how long do we have for us to turn this situation around? Of course, Washington has an answer to this. Failure to educate, make amends with ever bigger social programs. So instead of post-secondary education, far too many young people wind up in post-secondary dependency. So where do we begin? I have some suggestions that implemented together, and in many states this is what's going on, which gives me great hope and optimism, that if we put a package of reforms together, we can begin to see rising student achievement and the narrowing of the achievement gap that is one of the great social challenges of our time. First, we have to recognize that standards matter. High standards are the most basic element of reform. Standards define what children are expected to learn over the school year, what they need to know to prepare them for success in each grade. Ultimately, the quality of standards determines whether a high school diploma is worth more than the paper it's printed on. That means that every student who earns one is prepared for a college, starting in college, or a career. To compete with the rest of the world in the 21st century, we must produce competitive high school graduates. That means we need to raise the bar to make sure the skills they're learning are aligned with what employers and colleges expect high school graduates to show. Most states have recognized this need and are taking action. Many states are implementing standards that focus on things that matter. Fractions in elementary school, critical thinking across the board, problem solving, verifying work. Now we ask kids to write an essay about their favorite day. We ask them to express their feelings. Soon, we'll be asking them to compare excerpts from 2 research sources to determine where the evidence adds up and where it doesn't. Our kids are capable of this. State leaders have, together, developed a set of academic standards in math and English language arts. These standards set an ambitious and voluntary goal line. The states develop their content or game plans to get into the end zone. State and local leaders call the plays. They remain in control of the results. They're free to drop out. And then, what will happen is what always happens in good policy: the best will emerge from around the country in our great federalist system, and best practices will emerge, and people will apply those to assure that their children learn. Like most reforms, doing the right thing will not be doing the easy thing. There are critics of Common Core standards, both ends of the ideological spectrum. I know there's some in this room that disagree with my embrace of Common Core state standards, but listen, I respect those that don't agree with me. What I can't accept are dumbing down standards and expectations that exist today in almost every school in every state in our country. We can agree on that, I hope, that we need to raise expectations for every child before it's too late. Look, there will be a painful adjustment period as students adapt to these new standards. Remember, only a third of our kids right now are college or career ready. So if you have a test that assesses faithfully these higher standards, we'll have basically a graduation rate or a success rate of a third. It'll create a big stink, trust me. It'll create a big stink, but I think that stink is worth having today rather than having dreams unfulfilled over the next generation of time. And you know what? The greatest mistake we make in public education is underestimating the capacity of our children to learn. Under the banner of self-esteem, we whitewash failure. We demand more of our kids on football fields and basketball courts than we do in the classrooms. So once we have higher standards, then we need to develop strategies to assure that those standards are met. We must stop the practice of socially promoting illiterate children into 4th grade as the first most powerful thing that we do. It is an exercise in avoiding the problem at the expense of children. By the time students enter 4th grade, they've had to make the transition from learning to read to reading to learn. Those who don't make that transition can't read the textbooks. They can't do the homework. They can't pass the tests. Every year they fall further behind, get more frustrated, and get more disruptive. A decade ago, despite protests from all sides, Florida instituted a tough love policy to retain these kids in 3rd grade for intensive reading instruction. That got everybody's attention, trust me. In fact, I did this with the Florida legislature in 2002 in my re-election effort. It got the attention of my campaign manager, for starters, because a third of our children were below basic readers, and if nothing had changed that year, we would have had a third of 3rd graders held back. Talking about creating a little bit of focus on a problem, this is exactly what happened. So what happened in Florida? First, kids started, there was a whole focus on early childhood literacy. Kids in kindergarten began to receive instruction about learning so that they weren't functionally illiterate in 3rd grade. My mom's foundation encourages reading even before that, which I think is a great thing, because the first teachers of our children are our parents, and many parents today, sadly in our country, are functionally illiterate as well. Since 1998, the illiteracy rate for Florida's third grade students has been cut in half, and the number of retentions has dropped almost as much. Our fourth graders have advanced 2 grade levels in reading and recently finished second in the world, far above the American average on a prestigious international reading assessment. Over a 10-year period with this tough love policy and a focus on intervening early, Florida went from literally the bottom of the pack on the NAEP scores or in these international tests to being a leader in the world. Do you want to know something sad about that? There's nothing sad in my mind about it except that the Florida's Teachers Union has yet to recognize that fact or even celebrate this incredible accomplishment done by Florida teachers. What a shame. What a shame that even on the times when there's been great success because it's embedded in reform, those that advocate for the status quo do not focus on the celebration of the fact that children now will have a chance to be able to pursue their dreams as they see fit. It is heartbreaking, but the simple fact is the success of our students is a threat to union leaders because it means that reform works. And when reform works, it makes it harder to collectively bargain with adults that have a secret handshake to make sure the economic interests of they themselves, both the adults, so-called management and labor, come first at the expense of children. My third suggestion is to embrace technology since it's redefined the way we live and work, but as of yet has barely changed the way we educate. Kids come home from school, they drop off their backpacks laden with 40 or 50 pounds of books and all sorts of stuff. They pick up their iPads, they tap on an app, and off they go into the digital realm. Bam Bam Flintstone becomes Elroy Jetson. We need to make education relevant to 21st century kids, and that means communicating with them on their terms as digital natives. Digital learning can customize and personalize education for each student. Students can learn anytime, anywhere, in their own style, and at their own pace. In the classroom, digital learning provides real-time data so teachers can pinpoint weaknesses and differentiate instruction to address them. With digital education, students in rural Mississippi can take the same advanced placement courses available to kids in Newton, Massachusetts. They can advance to the next level or grade when they're ready, not when the class is ready. Advanced students would not get bored, and struggling students would not be left behind. Those opposed to reform hate digital learning because it's hard to collectively bargain for a teacher building content from Seattle, for example, maybe in his own garage, for a student in Miami. In most states, protectionist laws retard the advancement of digital learning. But the fact is that digital learning provides us with endless opportunities to rebuild the education system for the 21st century. Digital learning should be an option for students. And we need an education marketplace that gives families a myriad of options, not just digital learning. The presence of a competitor forces you to focus on quality and efficiency. You can't just open the door and take the customers for granted. Options allow parents to shop for a school that best meets their children's needs. Kids are different. At least in my family, I had 3 children. All of them are completely different. We have that exact same experience. Just to assume that we have this homogenized learning system on top of the most diverse group of kids in American history is just crazy. But what we should have is have the recognition that kids are different, they have different strengths and different weaknesses, and that parents ought to be much further engaged in their children's learning and have the power to make choices for those children. So why would we think in the most dynamic country in the world, why would we think that a 19th century governance model where we have 13,170 government-run monopolies as the governance model for our children in this world of dynamism, of innovation, of exciting prospects if you have the power of knowledge, why would we think that that governance model has to be held on to for dear life? It seems to me that if we embraced choice in every form and got out of the way a little bit, that we would find that we would have a much better result in rising student achievement. Can you imagine if newspapers had been blocked, had been allowed to block the internet? I think in retrospect they probably would have loved that idea. Or if the post office had been allowed to block email? We don't block progress because it's a threat to those that are vested in the past. I applaud the members of ALEC working tirelessly, courageously, I might add, with great political peril all across this country to open up our systems with public and private school choice to make the chance for children and their families better for the future. Accountability is another key reform. In Florida, we began grading schools. I know this will sound radical, so hold on. A, B, C, D, and F, 100% based on student learning. Trust me, the results were remarkable in the gains of academic achievement for our students. Imagine that. Confronted with a public outing of failing schools, districts in Florida responded with new principals, better trained teachers, tutors, new curriculum, and a whole lot more attention from headquarters. In a few short years, schools that had been graded F to start with began celebrating, and trust me, the celebrations were of great joy, celebrating the fact that they had earned an A. Let me give you an example of the power of school choice and accountability combined. In 1999, Florida began a scholarship program for students with disabilities known as the McKay Scholarship Program. Today, I think 26,000 students take advantage of this program. And parents can send their children with this program to a private school of their choice with the full funding following the child. That was in 1999. Shortly thereafter, we began counting students with disabilities in the calculations used to grade public schools. Lo and behold, they suddenly got a whole lot smarter because they got a whole lot more attention and their parents were empowered with other options than just being assigned to the monopoly school that they were driven to. And now Florida leads the nation, based on the NAEP tests, Florida leads the nation in learning gains for students with disabilities. You drive results not by dollars, but by child-centered policies and the courage to stick with them. And lastly, let me turn to teachers. Great teachers matter a lot. A child in the classroom of a great teacher gets a 50% bonus. He gets 15 months of learning in 10 months' time. A student in the classroom of an ineffective teacher, on the other hand, gets a 50% penalty. She gets 5 months worth of learning in 10 months' time. So when school lets out in June, a student who had a great teacher walks out the door a full year ahead of a student who had an ineffective teacher. And yet we pay both teachers the same. If there are layoffs and the ineffective teacher had been hired a day earlier, the great teacher would be sent packing. And if the great teacher gets frustrated, which many do, and quit, little if any effort is made to keep him or her. This may be a union-friendly model, and trust me, it is, but it's certainly not a child-friendly model. It's certainly not a model designed to attract the best and brightest into the teaching profession. We need to stop treating teachers like interchangeable workers on an assembly line and instead recognize them as individual professionals who truly matter. Great teachers must be recognized and rewarded, and those that have the potential to be great teachers need to get intervention so that they can reach their maximum abilities. And that will happen if we eliminate tenure as the governance model of our relationship between school districts and teachers. We need to evaluate and pay teachers based on their performance instead of how long they've been on the job. We need to change our certification models across the country to open up the teaching profession for those that are qualified, not necessarily those that go to our outdated schools of education that are not producing qualified teachers to the degree that we need them to assure that our children are successful going forward. There's a lot that can be done, and you all thankfully are doing that. And I'd like to recognize the work that you've done over the last few years. At the beginning of this education reform journey, ALEC was there at the beginning. Now, ALEC is leading the efforts, the hard fights that are being won all across this country in places like Arizona, North Carolina, Alabama, Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Louisiana, New Mexico, Oklahoma, I'm going to put Florida in there, Mississippi, Utah, Idaho, and a lot of other places. There is great work, Iowa, great work being done. Because if we don't completely transform education, we're defaulting on the American dream. America was founded on the principle that every American has the right to rise according to his or her abilities and hard work. That has been who we are. It's what gives us our mojo. Anyone can accomplish anything in America. Our greatness is dependent upon our ability to unleash the power of individuals to create prosperity, wealth, opportunities for themselves and their families, but for many others as well. It's why poor parents sacrifice to send their children to college. It's why people work long hours, start businesses, and take risks. It's why the best and the brightest from around the world want to come to our shores. The promise of economic mobility fuels innovation, entrepreneurship, and ties us together. It creates shared values for a successful country. In my travels recently, I've been all around the world, and I've seen the incredible dynamic cities, for example, like Hong Kong, Singapore, Tel Aviv, Bogota, and Dubai, and many others. They want to beat us by becoming us. This is what our kids are up against. I suggest we prepare them. Thank you all very much.